and Board of Ed representatives actually have a very specific job, which is different than your job of working inside a district or inside a school. And we want people who have your experiences there. How do you see yourself approaching the fact that, again, there's some nuances, but if I were to totally oversimplify it, your job is going to be to supervise one employee and to make macro policy, right? And
Yes.
how do you see your vision, or, how will you be able to navigate in there to be the most effective for the community you represent?
You said it quite clear in terms of being clear on what my role is, and you said it, to supervise the superintendent whose job is for the day-to-day operations of the school and letting the board know, letting us know what's needed in order for him to get the job done. So to me, the policies that are aimed at our priorities, evaluating the daily operation of the superintendent and those goals that are set forth, and obviously managing the budget. And part of that is getting the revenue that the superintendent needs to do his job. So for me, now it's on the macro level. It's one, okay, I'm going to go back to relationships. Developing relationships with board are, because we have to work together. It's not politics. This is human, how do you call it, dynamics, okay? It's the group dynamics. We have to set these norms, of how do we make these decisions, and how do we, when we disagree, what's that discourse look like, and how do we come back to the table? So those things are really essential, is creating that space. And then also as a board, having really, I'm again going back to being big on community and, just being transparent. What are those platforms? This is a new learning, and this may be here for a while, might be here forever. How do we create platforms or venues or whatever you might call it, where it's accessible to our community? And I'm always mindful of, look at the BIPOC community. They may not have access. They may not have, they're working two jobs. So how do we get their voice included in this? So, so that's really important to me, that the people are able to express their desires and needs for their children. So relationships foster that. And then we're guided by the strategic plan. I always want to go back to vision, because you need a vision in either to get to the end. If you don't, right? If you don't have that, then you're kind of off track. You're going to derail, and arguments, things like that go on. So you have to, have that vision, and you have your benchmarks. The board has to have it, as well as the superintendent. That's just project management. It's a good way to function. So yeah, I just think that it starts with relationships and being clear on what our role is, and having good communications with the superintendent and labor, and staying the course of the strategic plan. And lastly, making sure we get input from the community, and that what they say is part of the process.
I really appreciate that. You've answered a few questions in that that I had written down. One of them, just to bring attention to the question, but I feel like you answered it, is you're so committed, and this notion of community building and community connection is so integral to your being. I was curious how that would mesh with your role of oversight. And what I hear you saying is that you would be inclusive for voices and all this, etc. The other thing that you mentioned that I think is also really important to highlight and note is that your experience becomes your mindset, that your experience and your commitment to equity is how you're going to approach your policies, your relationship building, etc. And so I just want to highlight those and appreciate those.